How are you doing?
Good.
So welcome everybody to the first session on all electric homes. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Lucinda Flynn. I'm from Going Green Solutions and I'm an energy efficiency assessor. So that means I head into people's homes and help them work out where they might be using energy and how they could reduce it. I'm really excited that Sustainable House Day is being presented this way this year because it gives so much opportunity for people in regional areas that might not usually get to go and see a house to ask questions. So the whole purpose of this session is for you to be able to ask questions of our four panellists about their energy efficient and all electric homes. To that end, I just want to point out that at the bottom of your screen, you have a chat option and a Q&A option. So what I want to ask is if you have specific questions for panellists, could you put them in the Q&A box? And then the chat one, just use it for comments, or if you want to chat to other people that might be guests on this session, you can use that. But we won't be monitoring chat, just Q&A. Let's get straight into it. We've only got about 40 minutes. So could we please have an introduction from Ruth on the 10-star home?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Jacinta. So my name is Ruth Nordstrom. I'm the studio manager at Soho. So we have designed a 10-star house, which is essentially a prototype house for us. And the main purpose, besides getting 10 stars, is to essentially monitor this house and watch the way that the house actually adapts itself to the climate. So as people are probably aware, South Australia has this chronic issue of having blackouts during summer in particular. So we're hoping that this actually will give us enough data, and the CSIRO enough data to manipulate the regulatory software. So it can include other things like air tightness and potentially home automation in the future to actually be a little bit more reflective of a as-built rating rather than just a designed rating. So it's actually quite exciting for us, and we're hoping that this, as the sort of premium prototype version, will give us a lot of data, but then also from this and in line with our vision, having off-the-plan versions of this being more accessible to the public, hopefully we can actually drive that transition and make sure that anyone, regardless of where they are, and it's interesting that you mentioned, Lucinda, the regional people. So no matter where you are, people should have a right to healthy, happy homes. So that is what we're hoping that people can get out of this. So hopefully people enjoy the tour, and please get in touch if you have any more questions.
Fantastic, thank you. Could we next please hear from Luke from Happy House?
Sure thing. I waffled on a bit at the start during my video with my lovely dulcet tones, so I don't need too much of an explanation now, I don't think. I'm the owner and co-designer of Happy House. We're in West Gippsland in Warragul. The house is 12 months old, as I said, and it's essentially a reaction to where we live. A lot of project home developments going up all around us and sort of cutting into beautiful, beautiful land. So my wife and I saw an opportunity to try and build an urban infill lot in town and to build a house that's sustainable, architecturally designed, and fun to live in for sort of a budget that reflects what a lot of people are spending on their standard 4x2s that don't really have any relationship to the land or the climate that we live in. So that was our approach, and 12 months in, it's been going really, really well. So,
great, thank you.
Pleasure.
Liam from Davison Collaborative. Could you tell us a bit about your house?
Yeah, good morning. So our project, whilst it's definitely about environmental performance at its core, is also about kind of relative affordability, so accessibility of high quality housing in sort of Melbourne's inner suburbs. So we developed a collaborative procurement model that sort of enabled three couples to come together and buy a block of land in Brunswick and redevelop that block of land into three bedroom townhouses. So for us, it's sort of like we bought an old post-war single dwelling that had sort of served, an Italian migrant family for the better part of 50 years. And our proposition is that we're building three high quality townhouse style homes for the next generation. And interestingly, each of the homes is almost exactly the same size as that original home. So, you know, using what we have more efficiently being a really important part of sustainability as well. So yeah, we can go into the detail through the chat, I guess.
Great, thank you, Liam. And the fourth panelist is Brendan from Desert Rose House. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Lucinda, thanks. So yeah, hi everyone, I'm Brendan. I'm a PhD student at the University of Wollongong, and I was the Building Services Manager for the Desert Rose House. So the Desert Rose is Australia's first dementia-friendly net zero energy home. The house was designed and built by students at the University of Wollongong and TAFE New South Wales to compete in the Solar Decathlon competition that was held in the Middle East in Dubai of 2018. So the Solar Decathlon is a collegiate competition that challenges university teams from around the world to design, build, and operate architecturally inspiring and energy efficient homes. So Team UOW and the Desert Rose performed really well in Dubai, with winning a total of 9 awards, including second overall. So the Desert Rose has since returned to Australia, and it's been rebuilt at the University of Wollongong's Innovation Campus, where it acts as a living laboratory for research in sustainable building technologies.
Thank you, Brendan. So I'm just going to start with a general question, which is, I've noticed that a lot of you have incorporated energy monitoring in your homes, and I'm wondering what the most beneficial aspects of that has been, and whether having energy monitoring has sort of allowed you to pick up things that you might not otherwise have, so things over or underperforming. Could I start with Ruth from 10 Star Home?
Yes, certainly. There we go. I'm unmuted now. The reason we had to include the monitoring is because the house, for its first part of the life, isn't going to be used all the time. It's not going to have an occupant in there. So our initial inclusion of that was to ensure that we had the data in there and can take out days when there's abnormal activity. It does have its benefits though. So the ABB system that we've got in there with the automation can actually give the occupant a more visual representation of how full the battery is, what time of day appliances could be switched on, and so forth. So it actually ends up meaning that the owner becomes responsible for reducing that demand on electricity. So, I mean, we can only do so much with the envelope and the way that we design it, but it's also about having, a 10-star occupant in a 10-star house, essentially. So it's about educating people, and automation is awesome because it gives them that ownership, but it also, for people that might not have the same sort of physical abilities to open windows and so forth, they can actually do that on the house and work out what their comfort level. So the data on the house can be operated by their phone or voice as well, and then that way, what we're hoping on our particular house is that the prototype will essentially provide a framework that we can use on other types of buildings. So in more inclusive environments, aged care, education, they're all areas where there is a mental element to the way that people perform in spaces that relates to energy efficiency. So that's where our data inclusion comes from. However, it is becoming more and more common, and a lot of our clients are now asking for it. So I think it's also being driven by market demand.
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of questions that have come in about replacements, essentially replacements to gas. So one is about a replacement for a gas hob, and another is about replacement for gas instant hot water. Luke, would you be able to tell us what you did to replace those things in your all-electric home?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our kitchen, we have induction cooktop. Got a pretty good deal on it, so that's always handy because they're not cheap. But the induction obviously does use a lot of electricity when you're sort of cooking a meal, but obviously you need to manage when you're cooking, how many meals you're cooking, and what you're doing. For the hot water system, we have a heat pump, hot water system, electric heat pump, which in terms of energy consumption has been really good. It's got some sort of consistency issues we're working through, but the service has been sort of great. Obviously, we're living in a real world sort of situation where we have lots of people having showers at night time, so we need to manage what's going on. And still, one of the big things is for us is coming from a gas hot water house, instantaneous gas hot water, is just to learn to behave differently. What we're doing, obviously, you should never have 20-minute showers, but you definitely can't have them now. And if someone wants to have a bath, or the kids want to have a bath, then you really need to make sure that you're having a shower beforehand and just tracking what's going on. So, but those two things have worked really well. And yeah, we just monitor sort of how we use things and try and behave differently than we have in the past with gas, which is just always on. So.
Yeah. Thank you. I might ask Liam, there's a couple of questions here as well. There's obviously going to be quite a few people here that are not looking at new builds, but renovating what they already have. And there's a couple of questions that are around the idea of, if they have gas, say solar hot water with a gas boost, should they be replacing that with instant electric in order to get off gas, or, sticking with it? I guess the question is, how important is it to move straight from one to the other, or do you let things live out their life and then replace them? Liam, what do you think about that?
It's an incredibly good question. I think it's honestly obviously very, very specific to individual circumstances, but big picture, arguably the most sustainable infrastructure you have is the infrastructure you already have installed. Like buying new to replace, might not necessarily be the best short-term outcome. The instantaneous electric's really interesting. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment at apartment scale, and we've done a number of 20 to 30 apartment all electric buildings, and it's an issue that comes up consistently. Are we better off with a central electric heat pump for hot water, or are we better off with individual electric instantaneous units? And we don't have a good answer for that yet, to be honest. We've worked with a number of different building engineers with our own sustainability consultancy, and we're trying to figure it out, because ultimately those individual instantaneous units have a very, very high spike in power demand. And when you've got a large building with 20 odd apartments and you can't get your diversification right, you can end up tripping the building. So yeah, look, there's really complicated. In a macro scale. Yeah.
I have the feeling that renovations involve a lot more sort of trade-offs like that, where you have to work out what to do now versus later. I've got a question here from James. They are wanting to install an underfloor heating for the ensuite and bathroom. Wondering if you have any suggestions for what the most efficient underfloor heating system would be. This is, I'm assuming, for an electric house.
Slippers.
Oh, who will I ask? Brendan. Brendan, would you like to have a go at that question?
Yeah, sure. So in the Desert Rose house, we actually use a water-based system for our air conditioning. So we use an air-to-water, what's called an air-to-water heat pump for our heating system. We actually primarily use it for cooling, because we were designing the house obviously to buy. You can actually see these two panels behind me. They're not just picture frames. They have pipes that run through those picture frames, which actually provide cooling to the house. So I think in terms of heating, it's obviously going to be a very similar principle. So if you could get a system that couples, I guess, an air to water heat pump with the underfloor heating, as well as the general kind of heating and cooling of the building, that would definitely be a pretty efficient way of going about it.
Yeah, great. Okay, question from Colin. I might ask Ruth, because you've touched on this already. Have anyone installed management as well as monitoring, e.g. turning on hot water heating when there's spare solar available? I know, Ruth, you said that yours does incorporate management.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it does. And yeah, again, that's part of trying to have that visibility for homeowners so that they can reduce their energy bills even further. So that, I mean, obviously the 10-star house probably won't have any energy bill, but if it's a lower star rating, then that becomes a bit more crucial. So ours will operate things like dishwashers, washing machines, that you just set them up. It's kind of like a bit of a dream of mine to have that actually in my own house. That'd be nice, instead of having to do it on the weekends around kids. But yeah, so things like dishwasher, washing machine, those things that you don't necessarily need to be there to watch. You do. Also, the other management systems that we have are to do with the building temperature. So with the 10-star house, we're trying to keep it between 18 and 22 degrees.
Yeah.
So with the temperature sensors in there, the automation system and the data system will actually figure out when that thermal comfort level is outside of that. And it'll automatically turn on things like the fan inside or open the top level windows to purge that heat.
Yeah.
Similarly, in winter, it's also working with the HRV system because it's actually ensuring that we're managing and equalising that heat distribution across the whole of the building instead of being in pockets in those main living areas. And also looks at the CO2 level as well. So CO2, especially as probably people are aware through the coronavirus times, is quite important. Everyone was cooped up during winter. So by having management systems on the CO2 levels inside the building and working with the HRV, then that makes it a much cleaner environment indoors.
Yeah.
As well as the humidity as well.
Yeah.
A
question here from Tony. I might direct this at Liam. When I advocate with friends for all electric homes, the first question they always ask is, what happens when the electricity grid goes down? What is the answer, please?
It's a good question.
It was a bit like what you said about if they all have electric instant hot water systems, what happens?
Yeah. Well, look, we in this house we haven't had that experience yet. We do have a battery. We've got a Sonon battery installed, which is around 7 kilowatts, which you would expect would provide, some sort of power source in the event that the grid goes down. But there's obviously going to be a time, on that in terms of how much power you do have to draw and then the availability that you have. But the same could be said more broadly about, gas supply. That happened, if I remember correctly, back in the late 90s when we were all having cold showers for a couple of weeks. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's a particularly relevant question.
All right, Madeline Flynn is super keen to get off gas-powered hydronic heating. Are there electric units available to run this existing hydronic heating? Brendan, is that something you could answer?
Yeah, I guess it's a similar response to what we had just before. So in terms of a hydronic heating system, I think one of the most efficient technologies out there is a heat pump technology. So if you could couple that to some form of air to water based heat pump or couple it with your hot water system, there's definitely all electric ways out there to do that.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me, if anyone wants to ask further questions of any of the panelists, you can go to the Sustainable House Day site and look on the home profile and ask questions directly. So, for example, if people want to ask more about what Brendan was just saying, you can email the house and he can get back to you personally. Okay, we're trying to decide on heating, cooling and hot water systems to put into a new build. We're installing solar and electric cooking, wondering about individual electric panel heaters, which just plug into a power outlet. Luke, what do you think about that?
So that's what we've done as a cheap alternative. Obviously, hydronic heating would have been ideal, which can plumb into our hot water heat pump, but it was just out of our budget. So we've got quite cheap panel heaters around the house that we run using Google Home and Wi-Fi switches.
Yeah.
So we can sort of manage when they sort of go on and off. We can do it remotely. And then because they're only about $60 each, you can sort of put them wherever you need to and just sort of set the system up to really only heat when you need it, when people are around. And it's worked really well. To help with that, we have a large reverse cycle air conditioner running in the main communal space that just takes the edge off those sort of bigger areas. But for the small sort of individual spaces, bedrooms, studios, that sort of thing, we have the panel heaters that run and work really well and have done over
And that's
winter.
fine. Yeah.
That's been fine, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Another question about heating. Well, there have been a couple of questions in the Q&A section about what are good substitutes for ducted gas central heating. There must be a few people that are looking to switch and would like to, if possible, use what they have, the ductwork, and they're wondering, is this possible? Is there an option that you could substitute and use the same equipment? Do any of you have an answer to that? I'm not sure who to ask.
Can I jump in quickly? Like, I guess
Yeah.
If the discussion's focused on systems too much, you know, like one of our experiences is we're rating up at about 8.5 stars. So the external envelope of our building is, you know, incredibly highly performing. We've invested in windows that are equally highly performing. We've invested in like the base, kind of getting those passive design principles right. We haven't needed our heating. So we invested in a heat pump technologies that heats our hot water and provides hydronic heating. So we've got in-slab hydronic heating and we've got hydronic heating panels upstairs. I turned the heating off halfway through winter. We're finding that, you know, having gotten those broader passive design features right, we're less concerned about systems from a heating perspective. So it's almost like a shift in mentality when you're building a sustainable house and you're getting it right from first principles. You're less reliant on particularly heating, we've found, in Melbourne through this winter period. We just haven't needed it.
Mm.
It's amazing, actually. So it's just it's a game-changing experience.
So when you're doing a new build and do it properly, then heating is just not really the issue.
Well, also renovation. So if you're considering being in the home for a longer period of time, then those investments on your external envelope are critical. So your windows, your walls, your floor, and you can get really big gains with reasonably small amounts of expenditure to really improve the thermal performance of an existing home. So that targeted approach to energy efficiency is critical. It's such low-hanging fruit, and it really reframes the way you start to think about, you know, the active systems in your house. Total game changer.
So reframe ourselves to think of the house and the envelope first.
Yeah, particularly if you're renovating, you know, and you've been used to just pumping energy out of an active system to keep yourself either cool or warm. It's really important.
Okay, thank you. Ali and Rachel are asking about how realistic it is to be fully electric on an off-grid system and how large a system would need to be.
I think I could probably answer that one.
Yeah.
So I would say at this stage, going completely off-grid with just purely electric is probably pretty unfeasible at this stage. So unless you've got an extremely large battery that can, you know, last like a couple of weeks during, you know, winter when it might be a bit cloudy and those sorts of things, I think it's pretty unfeasible. But I think with kind of increasing technologies and smarts around batteries and those sorts of things, we're getting to the point with some smart management, you can get pretty close to being, you know, completely off-grid, only relying on the grid for those, you know, few instances where you might be cooking and having a large load on your house, or, you know, you might have a cloudy week or something like that. So I think completely off-grid, unless you had other means of producing energy, you know, like wind or a backup generator, it's not quite feasible. But yeah, we can certainly, you know, with the increasing battery technology and increasing advances in smarts around batteries, we can get pretty close to being completely self-sufficient.
Yeah. Luke from Happy House, do you have an energy monitoring system?
Not really, not to the extent of these other guys.
No.
So
okay, I've just had a couple of questions here about, maybe I'll ask Ruth then. A couple of people have asked what system you use for energy monitoring, and another person has asked they want a monitoring system specifically to maximise solar production, and whether the system you use, Ruth, would fill that bill.
Yeah, sorry, I just had a car go past me, even though I had it on the back end of that. So the two systems, or the system that we've got in there currently is ABB, And also we've done some additional stuff with smart automation designs to get additional information that is outside of probably what a typical homeowner would want to have. So what was the second part to your question?
They wanted it to be specifically able to maximise solar production.
Okay, so looking at the battery itself, I would assume, the battery solar panel?
Just to intelligently move loads into the solar window.
Move loads into the solar window.
Such as heat dump, hot water heating, EV charging, AC to pre-cool the house.
I might be able to help with that one.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do a very similar thing in the Desert Rose at the moment. So we try and shift a lot of our loads, so that includes hot water heating and things like EV charging and even our air conditioning system into that middle of the day when we've got excess solar. And the way we do that is, I guess as this question intended, we actually monitor each circuit within our home and also monitor the battery. So we have what's called a KNX, building automation system. That's the protocol. But all of these monitoring devices, essentially what they are is they use coils, which just go in your distribution board to measure the amount of power that's being used on each. So these are becoming cheaper and cheaper, and you can even buy kind of off-the-shelf products that don't need a building management system. You know, they just communicate over your home Wi-Fi and those sorts of things. And we actually use that data over time to sort of get an idea of how energy is being used in the house. And then we can control these different technologies like your hot water heater just by using a relay or a switch. So, you know, we can just have some simple rules that if the sun's shining and we're exporting energy back into the grid, let's turn the hot water heater on and heat some more power. Or if the building's getting a bit hot, let's turn the air conditioner on to cool that power during the middle of the day. That's generally how it's done.
That sounds what those people were looking for exactly. So that's great. Thank you. Another question from Ian is about, and I'm not sure who of you may have experienced that, but they've moved away from gas and been told by the gas supplier that they will have a large charge, 1,000 to 2,000, to remove the meter. Has anyone come up against this, and what did you do, and is that really true?
That's not true. It again depends on the authority, but I've experienced it a number of times. It costs about $500.
Okay. All right, so they should go back to whoever that supplier is and follow it up.
In and around the Brunswick area, we've done it twice, and it's cost $500 to $600.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Andrew, it always seems silly to me that we use air conditioning units to move heat outside our houses and then heat water up. Is anyone aware of any systems that reuse waste heat from air conditioning systems to heat water? Is anyone aware of?
There are systems out there. Yeah, we don't have it on the two houses that we've got in Sustainable House Day, but one of the gentlemen that we work with actually consults at the front end of design and then can work out if there's some sort of part of your building or occupancy or process that can actually recover heat. And one of those is using water. So that's Jonathan from Adelaide Geo Exchange, and there's a number of other companies that can actually consult at the front end and include that in your strategy as well. So, I mean, the best outcome that you can get on a sustainable house is to actually negotiate and collaborate with these people in the industry so that you've got the up-to-date information.
Thank you. I'm just trying to go through these questions. Is reverse cycle air conditioning more efficient than hydronic heat pump? Would anyone like to take a shot at that?
I'm not sure of the actual kilowatts that are used in the hydronic heating, but from my understanding, they are more efficient than...
Yeah, that would have been my understanding.
And also the quality of the air inside of your house without having a general reverse cycle air conditioning would be better. Probably relates back to that other question that you had earlier about the renovations and things like that. So if people are reusing ductworks, the first thing that they want to do if they're doing a renovation is actually analyse the building envelope And part of that is the ductwork and whether there's any holes that have happened over time, what's the air leakage on the building, and then look at whether sometimes for some of our smaller houses, they'll have like a little split system because that's the most energy efficient option just for that room. But that's, you know, more of a targeted approach depending on what sort of star rating they're after, how much they're wanting to live in the house over the next, you know, 10, 20 years. So it's all contextual based.
Yeah, yeah. Right choice for the right place. Luke from Happy House, Rui has asked, the heat recovery ventilation systems and air tightness in buildings, do these systems normally run 24/7 year round? Or would you also alternate them with cross ventilation?
So we don't have a HRV in our house. We just use cross ventilation and
okay.
and go from there. I think probably some of the other more advanced houses go from there. But,
yeah,
you know, I'm a big fan of cross ventilation, so I can speak.
I know, Liam, you said in your house that when that system wasn't working, it was not good. So do you combine cross ventilation with the heat recovery ventilation system?
Yeah, look, we do, but probably the heat recovery ventilation system that we've installed here has been the biggest revelation for us in terms of user experience. It's particularly through winter in Melbourne, just the idea of probably the best way I can describe it is if you've got a room in your house that's not used too often and you open the door and you almost hit a wall of air, really stale kind of air that doesn't circulate. In our house, we can have a spare bedroom that hasn't been open for 2 weeks. You open the door and you just hit with a crisp, beautiful feeling. Like it really is. And then also standing dust, and I had to replace the filters recently on our HRV system, and they were basically black. So after 6 months of use, they're kind of, they're black, and just getting a sense of the quality of air that's coming through the house.
Yeah.
Because that's the other side of natural ventilation, particularly in urban environments, is like, just what are you then letting into the house? With absolute revelation, the Stiebel HRV has been well worth the investment.
Yeah, it sounded amazing when you did your review of the house.
Yeah.
Someone has asked whether we can please have an explanation of heat pumps and what they do and why they're better. Is that something, Brendan, you might like to answer?
Sure. So a heat pump is essentially, I guess, a device that takes energy out of the air and then transfers that to energy that can be used within the house for heating or cooling. But one of the key, I guess, features of why heat pumps are more efficient is they have what's called a coefficient of performance. So you can actually put a certain amount of electrical energy into a heat pump and get a lot more thermal energy out. So for things like a simple, resistive heater that some people, those little blow heaters that people have in their house, you put 2 kilowatts of electrical power into it and you get 2 kilowatts of heating out. But a thing like a heat pump, you can put 2 kilowatts of electrical energy into it and actually get 6 kilowatts of thermal energy out. So the way they work, they essentially just give you a lot more bang for your buck. So in terms of energy efficiency, they're a lot better than the more kind of, I guess, traditional forms of just electrically heating and cooling, with resistive heaters and those sorts of things.
Thank you. I'm getting a lot of questions still about heating and cooling. So people are saying they understand about passive design and how important that is in reducing the need for heating and cooling, but they still want to know what the best options for heating and cooling are. So if we first talk about heating, Luke, is that something you could give us your opinion on?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it comes down to budget, of course. There's some good discussion actually in the chat as well around heat pump hydronic versus cycle, which is essentially a heat pump anyway. And really what your expectation of is in terms of how you want to live. If you don't mind being a bit hot or a bit cold, then you can really get away with a lot less as well, which is fine. But I think Liam really hit the nail on the head by saying if you focus on the building envelope and how you actually build the house, if you have that option, then the impact to the inside temperature is massive. It doesn't sort of vary as much as you would expect. So you can get around with just wearing normal clothes most of the time. But yeah, so we have simple electric panel heaters where we can control the off and on as much as we need to make sure we don't overuse energy. And then we have a reverse cycle just to take the edge off when we need to take the edge off, because that was the most efficient and cost-effective solution for us.
Is that for heating?
Heating and cooling.
And cooling.
And then ceiling fans, of course, cross ventilation. We use skylights to purge hot air at night, and do as much as we can to maintain comfort by doing just running around the house and opening stuff and moving things around to capture what we need to capture, which is half the fun of living in a house. Yeah,
so reverse cycle air conditioning, fans, ventilation.
Yep, panel heating. It just comes down to what you want to spend, where you are, what you need to experience as well. And also just put some socks on if your feet are cold as well.
All right. We've probably got time for one more question, then we're going to have
one more question.
Move on.
Sure. I've read information regarding using clear plastic membrane to cover windows for secondary glazing. It's widely used in Canada and America. Does anyone know how effective it is? This wouldn't have been on a new build, but has anyone experienced the window film?
In our previous house, we had Comfort Plus glazing, which I believe has the film built into it. I can't speak exactly, but it was nowhere near as good as double glazing. But it did have some impact in reducing the amount of solar or UV radiation coming in. But the amount of actual active heat loss or gain just in ambient temperature was still massive.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. There's been so many questions. I'm sorry I haven't been able to get through everything, but like I said, if you go to the Sustainable House Day house profiles, you can ask questions of each panellist there. Thank you very much for all the panellists, Ruth, Luke, Liam and Brendan, for their time and for creating their videos to put on the Sustainable House Day site. And thank you to all the guests who have asked questions and participated. Have a good day, everybody.
Thanks very much, Lucinda. And yeah, thanks again to all the panellists there. Fantastic session. As Lucinda said, yeah, if you need to try and get in touch and ask more questions, go to the website. As we've sort of said before, we're running 3 separate rooms today. This is one. There's 30 sessions in total running with different houses and different topics. So if you want to jump between the rooms, feel free to do so and go back to the SHD website to see which rooms and the links to go where. And during the week, we're also running extension sessions as well on various topics, webinars and Q&A sessions. So have a look at those and feel free to join us on those too.